Everyone, Maurice, and welcome to Things Invest, where we talk about investing, finance, and professional development. For today's video, it's 10 purposes only. The investment I'm going to talk about today would be Ethereum, ticker ETH. First, I just want to say happy Sunday, everybody. Hope everybody had a great weekend so far. I know I personally did. Yesterday was just a beautiful weather. I spent some great time with my family and my dog. Went hiking and also went to this food market up in the Uptown area in New York City. So definitely a great time overall, great atmosphere, great people, great food at the same time. So as of today, Sunday, Ethereum's currently trading around like 0.54%. So we're kind of hovering around, like not really doing much. As expected, we basically consolidated ever since, the whole sell-off that we've had ever since that $4,383. So I'm gonna go through a technical analysis, obviously keep you guys up to date with respect to how we're trending going forward. I know a lot of you guys are like myself, very diligent as an investor, right? We always want to be making sure how we are risk mitigating. And that's why I come in. I want to be helpful on informing you guys and giving you guys the clarity and transparency that you guys are looking for. So stay tuned, stick around, and let's make some money. Moving on to the technical analysis for Ethereum ticker ETH. So just quickly go over the historical levels first. You can see that ever since basically starting from April 13th all the way to April 25th, we had this like consolidated oscillation that we were expecting comparable to ones that we're having currently, be ahead of the rally, right? And the catalyst that was driving this rally was mainly driven by the Coinbase IPO, the Elon Musk SNL debuts, and a lot of just positive media affectation around like the evolutions of Ethereum 2.0, and a lot of the Eastern Hemisphere news related to China with respect to the global adoptions and utilizations for Ethereum as well, for the exchange on the commerce side, which subsequently drove a lot of pressure, right, upward swing from there. And you could see that the balloon basically popped ever since we hit that $4,383 level. And the same correlating reasons that I mentioned, right, with respect to just the poor depictions around the SNL show that Elon Musk has given us. And also, same correlating reasons again, right, with respect to the Chinese compliance pressure for the regulations for cryptocurrency as a whole going forward, which, if you think about that, it's very counterintuitive, right? Because of the fact that cryptocurrencies, the mantra of it is to really decentralize, right? Which is basically not to have a centralized currency that's regulated, right? And for Chinese government to put pressure on it, it subsequently drove a lot, obviously, negative pressure onto the value proposition of this asset as a whole, which subsequently drove this sell-off, right? And we sold off immediately from there. Basically, whatever goes up really fast comes down really fast at the same time. And the technical was basically foreshadowing this the whole time, right? If you knew about technical analysis, if you knew about like the economics on the supply and demand level perspective, you see that the MACD was extremely dragged up, right? And on top of that, the RSI was extremely overbought, right? That the balloon was popped. This pop was basically something that was it was destined to happen, right? Whatever goes up really really fast comes down really fast in the physics perspective, right? If you throw a ball up in the air, it will come down the same speed as you threw the ball at, right? With the same power and the same inertia, right? So that's exactly what happened, and that's why it's correlating, right, on both a physical perspective, but also in a supply and demand perspective, right? Same elasticity among people's purchasing power or selling power, right? It's the same dynamics. And we sold out right there, right? Immediately from the 4,383 to the 1731. And the level that we tested is basically the oscillation level that we've had like long ago, basically around like the March period. And you could see how much we have durated, right? We durate for quite some time, right? You could see we hover around like ever since April 02 all the way to like March 24th. So it's basically like about like a month and like 2 months to be more to approximate of duration of consolidation, which is a fairly substantive consolidation level that we've had, right? So that's why we retested that and ever since kind of oscillate and consolidate on a sideways fashion, contingent on the next catalyst that's coming, right? So right now, as of recent time, you could see that we had this like one sell-off, and I would say the sell-off was relatively minimal by like a couple $100. And again, that was majorly driven by the CPI report that came out. The report came out relatively optimistic if you did a little bit of deep dive into the numbers, right? Despite obviously a lot of negative media affectation around just the the emphasis on inflation, right? But if you know about like the basic macroeconomics, right, you know that quantitative easing and the stimulus checks has been something that we've been sustaining our economy for the last one and a half years, right? So for you to be emphasizing inflation as something that is a huge detriment that in a very sudden fashion, it's just not the most logical and frankly a little bit manipulative coming from the media publication side to basically use like CPI report as a catalyst, if you may, as like a reason to trip people up. The more gullible investors ones, right? That think that inflation is really blowing up right now. But in fact, we've been getting those stimulus checks and we've been, the corporate companies have been supported by the government by simply government printing money for us, right? The Federal Reserve have been just printing money to provide more liquidity into the market so we could circulate and use that for, obviously for, sustaining the company's operations and obviously sustain our livelihood as a whole. But to do that in the same correlations, we have to depreciate our dollars, right? The more supply of dollars goes into the market, the lower the value goes, right? So now they're screaming inflation, inflation, inflation. It's something that's been happening for the 1.5 years, right? So for you to be expecting that is happening all in a sudden, it just doesn't make any sense in any logical perspective, right? So I think some people was definitely gullible in the fact that they sold on Thursday when the CPI report came out, and we had some like selling pressure across the equity market. However, on the Friday, I believe people woken up in a way. And that subsequently drove a sector rotation across a lot of institutional investors, which subsequently drove the pump on a lot of the growth stocks and recovery stocks, right? And at the same correlation, knowing the fact that cryptocurrency is is something that is more of a safe haven type of instruments as an investment vehicle, right? And the Ethereum is in a prominent position for that, which subsequently drove some minimal selling pressure, right? However, with respect to the equation of the investment pool, comparing long-term investors versus short-term investors, the sentiment and the supply and demand dynamics on the chart right now is showing that there are a lot more long-term investors in this pool in comparisons to short-term investors in the pool, right? So that's a good sign, for us long-term investors, knowing the fact that more people are holding than selling before. Like I would say like a couple of years ago, we used to see things like 40% pump or 40% drop, right? Now we kind of seeing these like type of sideways oscillation, maybe up like 5%, down like 5%, or at maximum like 12%. But are we going to be seeing more like 75% drop or like 50% drop in the near term? I would say that's becoming more and more mitigated going forward, which is a great sign for long-term value proposition and more gravitas to the asset as a whole, right? So looking at more of an outlook going forward, I do foresee us to have a little bit more upswing pressure, knowing the fact that the MACD is kind of crossing upward right now. So I do foresee some buying pressure coming in the first half of the week coming on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Knowing the fact that the RSI is oversold at the moment, we're kind of reversing at the moment. So we should be reversing back up to this level of $3,450. And contingent on the pressure from the equity market on how that anti-correlates going forward, we should be going back upward and continue to oscillate from there. So that's a definitely great sign, for you to swing trade. I don't mind buying it today actually at the $2,340. I think that's a great like swing trade or like a day trade type of thing if that's what you want to do, right? Like again, right, the frame that I've mentioned to you guys multiple times now would be, the lowest would be like the 2,100, or the $2,000 level. The first level resistance would be at 2,250. Second resistance level 2,450, and the peak will be all the way to the $2,750, right? So we can oscillate on the sideways fashion from there. So swing trading with this like ping pong ball type of bouncing up and down type of fashion from the bottom floor to the top ceiling, that type of way. That could generate you like a couple $100 on a weekly basis, depending on how many obviously Ethereum you buy, right? It multiplies if you buy more, right? So that's something that I would play with. In a more of a long-term perspective, I definitely see something that's quite interesting right now. So right now we are forming more of an upward trend at the moment, right? You could see that we are forming this one-time candle right here at the 17, no, not the 17, the $2,000 level, and then we have this like kind of more of a peaky upward escalator to the 2,150, and then we have this like even more of an upward peak of the 2,275. So we're gradually forming this like kind of an upward type of swing up. And this is something that is called the upward wedge. Okay, so upward wedge is something that is relatively more on the bearish side. Okay, so right now, I think short-term investors are slowly converting into long-term investors, which is the equation and the depictions that we see in front of us. However, because of the fact that long-term investor is becoming a lot more heavily weighted now in the weighted average cost of capital perspective, if there are some corporate decisions or one of the big whales decide to sell, the balloon will pop from there. And I think the depiction what we're seeing right now is exactly that. So I foresee us to further oscillate on the sideways fashion, right? And we still need to confirm if this is like an upward wedge that we're seeing right now, because upward wedge are always bearish. We always see a downsell from there. So something we need to verify and testify and observe the trend a little bit more to see, because what if there was a negative catalyst that's coming that's causing some seismic market sell-off in the crypto side, this could be pretty worrisome for us as long-term investors. But again, if you think about this a long-term holder, I don't think that's something you need to worry about, because we need to go through those like market volatilities. But knowing the fact that this is an upward trend right now, and upward trend has always historically proved to be a bearish pressure, that there's a possibility that we will go back down to the $1,730 in the near term. Contingent on this wedge right here, okay? Because this is an upwards wedge. In a long-term perspective, is a good thing, because we know that more long-term investors are in the pool right now versus short-term investors. However, because of the fact that long-term investors, and most of the time the long-term investors are whales with large market power, we basically giving them a little bit more power in the weighted average cost of capital perspective, right? The weight is a lot heavy on the long-term side now, that they have the largest market power, that if there was some black swan event that happens in the near term, a really bad news on Ethereum as a whole, or in the crypto market as a whole, it could pop the balloon from there, and we could sell back down all the way to the 1731. So I would be cautious if I was you, but just know that that's a possibility that's coming based on how the chart is slowly progressing to form right now, despite this like positive long-term outlooks. Hopefully that makes sense, but something that we need to be mindful of, right, just to recap all the numbers that we just talked about today. So with respect to the current price point, we are oscillating right now, and we are going to be just basically bouncing up and down on the sideways fashion right now. So I think buying at this current level, in the near term, in the next couple of days, we should see some positive upwings pressure from there. Knowing the fact that the MACD and the RSI are telling us that story specifically. But if we have no selling pressure getting down to the $2,100, that's possible. But I think the likelihood of like to get there in like the next couple of days, based on how the chart is set up right now, would be unlikely. I mean, contingent on any negative media affectation that we might be foreshadowing going forward, right? So that's something we need to testify and verify. And with respect to the steel level, knowing the fact that this is something that's more like a to be determined, is that the upward trend is forming, the wedge is forming, right? We need to see if this is truly a confirmed upward wedge that we're seeing right now, because if this is really truly upward wedge, and that's something that we're percolating going forward, eventually as we hit that very consolidated oscillation level, that you need to continue to like the spread of the wedge is going to be start from obviously the widest portion, right, to the smallest portion, and by the time we hit that very tight part of the wedge, we will fall back from there, and we could see it in the chart. But right now we don't have any confirmation with respect to the signal that we see right now, but if it happens, right, we will go back down close to like the $1,800 or the $1,750 level. that's just the logics of the supply and demand dynamics, right? Because there are more long-term investors in this play, and long-term investors in the weighted average cost of capital perspective are more whales in this equation now, right? So they have more market power on manipulating or jerking the price of the power, if you may, right? So 1750, that's possible, but if we get there, I was probably load up from there, and I personally will load up from there actually, and I would start to reserve some cash on the side for this opportune catalyst or black swan events that might occur in the near term, contingent on obviously the wedge formation that we're seeing, right? Today, with respect to my technical analysis on Ethereum ticker ETH, really appreciate you guys for dropping by today. Really appreciate your diligence at, actually, knowing the fact that today's a Sunday, you guys are working hard on, doing research and study on your investment opportunities. So definitely great kudos to you. I'm similar to you. I'm someone that's pretty meticulous, and I like to risk manage my portfolio, despite any days of the week or the day. So really good characteristics that I appreciate you guys have, and thank you so much for dropping by and listening in, and ingrained trust in me. And with respect to this wedge, I think there's something that is still percolating, is forming slowly in that propensity fashion, but we don't know. We don't have a confirmation on the trends yet, right? But that's something we need to look out for, and it's my responsibility to just keep you guys up to speed on the just give you the transparency and clarity on what we're looking at in front of us, right? So hope you guys find this helpful. Spend the rest of the day on Sunday with your family, go out, spend some good time, and stop worrying about cryptocurrencies like myself. But anyways, really appreciate you guys, and stay tuned for the next video coming up.